Are you a pro editor, or do you want to be a pro editor? In today's video, I have 10 editing tips that all the pros use, and maybe 11 if you stick around to the end. So let's see how many of these you haven't heard before. Let's jump on in. Now, before we do any editing, let's check out some of the settings that we might want to change. In Premiere Pro, go up to Edit, go to Preferences, and we're starting with the timeline category. Starting from the top, I recommend changing all the default durations. For video transition, I like it around 10 frames. It's not too long, but long enough so that it's easy for me to extend in the timeline if I need to. For audio transition, I like to make this 2 frames, and this will make sense in the next tip. And for still images, I like to change this to 1 second, because before, when it was too long, when I would drag an image into my timeline, I would always have to check if it's replacing anything else in sort of my long timeline, because you don't want it to overwrite anything. That's why it's better to have it shorter so you can always extend it later. Moving down to timeline playback auto scrolling, by default, when the playhead goes past the edge, the timeline will then jump to the next page. So I usually change this to no scroll. So that way, when I'm adjusting something in the timeline here while it's playing, I don't want it to jump away and break up my flow. The last one here is disabling at playback and return to beginning. So you know that when you're at the end of the timeline, and if you hit play, it jumps back to the start. I don't really want that. It's kind of annoying. Basically, I don't want my timeline to jump around when I'm not the one controlling it. I just find it disorienting. Next, let's go to the media tab. So if you're working with footage that's larger than your sequence, for example, 4K videos inside of a 1080p timeline, when you have this, you're always going to have to scale down the footage on all those 4K videos. But if you change the default media scaling to set to frame size, so when you drop the footage in the timeline, Premiere Pro will automatically set it to the frame size for you. This one is a huge time saver. The last setting that I can't live without is underneath audio. It's the play audio when scrubbing. And I have to have this turned off or it drives me crazy if I'm just moving the playhead in the timeline and you can just hear the scrubbing audio. I just have that turned off so that way the only time I hear audio is when I hit that space bar. The next tip applies to pretty much any editor that has jump cuts with their talking head, which pretty much includes everyone, right? Or even if you don't, this tip will still be useful because it applies crossfades automatically to your audio. So when you have a bunch of audio clips here cut together like this, you'll inevitably get these pops and clicks. This is Professor Gal here with a string. We can easily avoid this by selecting all the audio, hit Shift D to apply crossfades to all the cuts. This is Professor Gal here with a strange. And since we changed our default audio transition to 2 frames only in the settings, all the crossfades are short enough so that way it's smooth and the 2 different audio clips are not fading into each other. The next tip is from our sponsor Film Impact. It's a plugin for Premiere Pro, but don't worry, not all of our tips here involve plugins. This one is just too good to not tell you about. If there's one plugin that I use the most in Premiere Pro as well as my editors, it's Film Impact's Motion Tween. What it lets you do is basically animate without having to keyframe. Let me show you. For example, if I want to move this image in my timeline, I can add a cut here, and on the first part, I can move the image to where I want it to start. And on the second part here, I can move it to where I want it to end. Then just go to Effects, search for Motion Tween, and drag and drop and apply it to this cut point. And now when I hit play, the image just now animates, and it even adds a motion blur. I can also change the animation type by adjusting this curve editor. How about we give it more bounce? We specifically add this for a lot of the zooms on my talking head shots. Just add a cut here, choose the zoom amount, and where it zooms to, then you can plop in the motion tween and boom. It's done. If you're getting any black bars here, go to Effect, Controls, Motion Tween, and underneath the render options, just change the blend type to composite. You can also save this composite version as a preset here. Just right click on the effect itself and give it a name. And this way you don't have to redo it each time. It'll just exist underneath your presets. I can't stress enough how much I use this effect. I don't know what I would do without you. So in the last tip, I showed you how to save the preset with Motion Tween. What if I show you how to do it again? So if you often work with green screen setups that are in the same environment, I recommend creating an Ultra Key preset. First of all, what you need to do is apply the Ultra Key effect to key out the green. Then you can adjust the settings to make the background as clean as possible. And then once it's all set, you can right-click to save the Ultra Key as a preset with all the settings, so next time you don't have to redo it. You can just drop the preset and move on. You might have to do a few tweaks to the settings if the lighting changes at all, but overall, this can save you some time. And as an editor, if you're a pro editor, you know that it's really all about trying to be as efficient as possible. So if you do any color grading to a talking head environment that has the same setup each time, kind of like myself, and you want to be able to save this as a template so you don't have to redo it every single time, what you can do is you can apply all the effects to adjustment layers. And then once you're done, you can delete the video. And then you can save it as its own project file that you can reopen as a starting point. So all you need to do is select those adjustment layers and copy it and paste it on top of the new footage in your new project. We may have to do a few tweaks to some of the Lumetri settings, but it is a fantastic way to save time. And I actually made a video on how we do our color grading, which you can check out as well. And as I mentioned before, keep in mind that this works best if you're filming in the same setup. If you're constantly changing different scenes, then it probably doesn't make sense to have a template unless you shoot in log and you just want to have a generic log to Rec 709 conversion let that you just apply to all of your footage, for example, as a starting point. And hey, if any of these tips have been useful to you, why not drop a like? It only takes a second. So I'm going to mention one more effect from Film Impact, and it's called Alpha Effects. And it's just one of the many effects they added to Film Impact at the end of last year. This effect is very simple, yet powerful. What it does is it helps remove the background from any logos or graphics that you add to your timeline. It's pretty much an upgraded version of Premiere's built-in Luma key. So for example, I have this logo here and it has a background, so let's drag and drop the alpha effects, and right away it gets rid of the background for me. If I go to Effect Controls, you'll see that by default, the alpha effect is set to fully automated. Now, if I had a more complicated logo design, I can change this to manual to adjust these settings manually to get the best results. So Film Impact literally has so many different effects and transitions that we can't fit them all into this video, and I've been using it for years and years and years. Usually it's one of the top plugins that I mentioned that me and my team use because it has the most useful effects. And I actually met Yap, the creator of Film Impact, and I'll never forget him because when we met, he handed me his business card, and his business card was metallic, and it was heavy. And I was like, this guy has a fancy card. I need to check out what this is. And, I logged in, downloaded it, and we've been in communication and partners ever since. So I guess the moral of the story is, get a metal business card. With Film Impact, we can create quick animations using their pop motion impacts, their flips, their glitches. They also have some really cool wiggle effects that you can drag and drop onto your talking head footage. And what really sets it apart from other plugins is that their transitions behave like built-in transitions. So you drag and drop them between clips and you can change the duration just like any normal Premiere Pro transition. So if you're interested in trying it out, you can use my promo code PremiereGal10 to get 10% off. Thanks so much to Film Impact for sponsoring, and now we have some more tips for you. For the next pro tip, I want to talk about keyboard shortcuts. Now, I won't be listing out all of the useful keyboard shortcuts. In fact, if you have the Premiere Gal keyboard, you can just look down and remember some of the keyboard shortcuts. But in this one, I'm going to show you how to actually create a few of your own custom shortcuts. From here, we're going to go to Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts. And here I can look for any command I use often and see if there's any shortcut already assigned to it. And if not, I can add one myself. So this can be a little overwhelming searching for shortcuts, but just think about the things that you need to do that you use often as a starting point and create a shortcut for that. Let's start with Ripple Delete. So the default shortcut isn't very convenient. To make it more simple, I would just change it to Q or anything that works for you that's just a simple one key click. I also recommend adding shortcuts for your most commonly used labeled colors, so that way you can just quickly assign a label color to the footage and get organized faster. Also, if you do a lot of animating, setting a keyboard shortcut for ease in and ease out can save you a lot of time. That way you don't have to, find the keyframe, right click, and go to time interpolation and then ease in, ease out. You just save a lot of steps, right? And since we're talking about keyframes, have you heard of filtering your effect controls for only keyframe properties? And this is really useful if you have keyframes set on a bunch of effects and you're tired of having to scroll through all the effects. So I would add this filter option as a keyboard shortcut as well. There are a ton of other useful commands too, but I would recommend thinking through what are the common things that you do. Would you change any of the existing keyboard shortcuts, or maybe add some new ones to the ones you use often? For example, adding a frame hold. That's something that I use often. And here you can save these shortcuts as a preset up here on the top, so you can go back to default anytime without worrying about messing anything up. One of the cool things about using Premiere Pro and After Effects is that you can right-click on anything in your Premiere Pro timeline and have it open up in After Effects as a composition. And whatever you do in After Effects, it will be reflected inside of Premiere Pro thanks to Dynamic Link. For example, what if I want to mask myself out and separate myself from the background? Using Premiere Pro's masking tools, it just won't cut it. See what I did there? So being able to jump into After Effects and use their rotor brush tool is way better. The only problem is once I'm done, the linked composition from After Effects just performs so much slower inside of Premiere Pro. So what I like to do is press Option on a Mac or Alt on a PC and duplicate that comp inside my timeline. Then I can right click and choose Render and Replace. And here I can choose the video format like QuickTime and the location for the video. And I'll leave it as default here. And if you added any other effects to this clip in Premiere, make sure to tick Include Video Effects box. Then click OK, and once it's done, you'll get a video file with all the effects already applied, already rendered in the clip, so it doesn't bog down your playback. And if you ever want to make any further adjustments in After Effects, you can still go to that original layer. You can right-click, choose Edit Original, and After Effects will open up again for me to make any other changes. And using Render and Replace also works for audio as well. Talking about audio, here's a quick way that you can normalize your audio. In the timeline here, I have my mic audio clip selected, and I can hit G on my keyboard to bring up the gain controls. Here, I'm going to choose the Normalize All Peaks option. And here, if I put in -1, Premiere will bump up the volume of this entire audio track till the peak or the loudest part of this audio hits -1. Of course, you can normalize multiple audio clips at the same time using the same method. But doing this is just a starting point, right? We actually just made a video on 5 steps to get better audio. So you can watch that video to see all the different things that you can do that's built into Premiere Pro to just sound better. Feel free to check that out once this video is done. So video files are getting bigger and bigger. We have higher resolution options. We have higher frame rates. Do the innovators of these cameras stop to think about how my 6-year-old computer is handling these pixels? If your computer is struggling to edit 8K or even 4K files, this is where we recommend using Proxies. So what you can do is you can go to all your files here in the Premiere Pro project panel, and you can right-click on all the files you want to make proxies for and select Create Proxies. Here you can lower the frame size and choose one of the presets. If you're on a Mac, I recommend QuickTime Proxy, and for Windows you can go with the H.264 MP4 proxy. Then hit OK, and all the proxies will start being created using Adobe Media Encoder. And once it's done, you can throw all the footage into the timeline, and underneath the program window, you can use the Toggle Proxies button to use the proxies or switch back to the original full quality file. It's like they're linked together, and you just have to use this button to toggle it on or off. And if you don't see this Toggle Proxies button, you can click on the plus icon here and you can drag it in so it will be there. Also, another handy tip, when the proxy is being used, you'll see this little icon next to the clip name in the timeline, so that way you know it's working. Editing using proxies is just more smooth in general, so I recommend using them anytime you're experiencing any type of lag, even if you're just editing 4K. And that's it. Are you still here? Cool. I have one more bonus for you. So here is the secret bonus tip for those of you that stuck around. You might already know that pressing L is like fast forwarding through your timeline, going faster, and pressing J is going and rewinding, going backwards. This can help you skip through your footage fast when you're going through the assembly process. But sometimes it can feel a little bit too fast. But did you know if you press Shift plus L or plus J at the same time, it'll only speed up 10% each time you press it. So that way it gives you a bit more control. Also, if you hold K and L at the same time, it'll play back in slow-mo. In today's video. Same with KJ, it'll play backwards in slow-mo. The more you know. Let us know in the comments if any of these tips were helpful to you, and if you have any tips to share yourselves, be sure to leave a comment below. Don't be shy, we help each other out. This is a community here. And don't forget to stay creative. And as always, keep creating better video with Gal. See you next time. Bye.